This is the letter of intent. I call it a book of obligations, commitments, or promises by the BiH government. First commitment, what they say, to have economic growth and reduce fiscal burden for the employers, for the real economy.
Yes.
How do you comment the latest action of federal government that is, let's say, adopting half reforms and not complete ones, the full ones, and additionally burdening the employers and workers?
I call it a good first step in the right direction, actually. Why do I say that? Taxes on labor in the Federation, and particularly in the country as a whole, but in the Federation in particular, are very high. What happens when taxes on labor are very high? There's less employment. Businesses find very expensive to hire employees and pay all their contributions. So there's also a second effect, which is high evasion. So what did the authorities commit to in the letter of intent? They committed to reduce tax on labor. Okay, reducing tax on labor and simplify the personal income taxes. So what have they done now? They did the first step in the process, which is to broaden the tax base and apply the general collective agreements, on the rule book of the collective agreements. And in the second step, they have committed in the LOI, is to reduce taxation, to reduce the contribution to the Social Security funds.
Yes, but in the letter of intent, they said, we will do it at the same time, and it will enter into force at the beginning of 2017.
Yes.
Now they did a step that they're additionally burdening the employers and workers, and they didn't keep their promise.
Implementation of laws and implementation of policies sometimes is a messy process. That it would take several steps, and I think that's what we're seeing now.
1 month ago, the IMF transferred the money to Bosnia and Herzegovina. Republic of Srpska immediately took the money the next day.
Yes.
But the money of the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina is still on the account of the central
Yes.
bank, because the parliament didn't gave it a green light, let's say, to take it. How do you comment on that? Because government of Federation is saying that they don't need that money so badly, and we all know that they were rushing against the time, meeting at the restaurants and the cafeterias just to sign the letter of intent and get the money.
The letter of intent and then signing the letter of intent, it's a long-term program. It's a big package for 3 years. So the financing is necessary. This is long-term budget support, long-term financing. The authorities in the Federation don't have liquidity constraints, so there is no particular rush of having the money dispersed right now. Again, it would be important to have it dispersed before the end of the year, because then the needs will be there.
For decades, the main goal of the IMF is reducing the public administration. Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, they said that they will reduce for roughly 400 workers, and they will save around 5 million euros. But at the same time, the service contracts are rising, and they're about 6 million euros for now. What is the deal there?
The problem that you have in Bosnia and Herzegovina is that spending on wages and government spending is too high. Government spending as a percent of GDP is around 45% for Bosnia and Herzegovina. Spending on wages alone is 12% of the economy. That's the highest in the region. So that needs to be reduced. And what the authorities have committed to is to reduce the size of government and reduce the size of public employment over the medium term. Okay, and that's the first step that they have committed to is to reducing employment in 2017. Permanent employment in 2017.
Why don't you pressure more the cantons, because they're let's say, the biggest employees?
You make a good point. Cantons, for example, in the Federation, cantons and municipalities, lower levels of government and extra budgetary units account for about 70 to 75% of government spending. So that's also something that needs to be addressed. In the program, the authorities of both the Federation and the Republic of Srpska have committed to controlled spending in lower levels of government, extra budgetary units, and the state-owned enterprises.
Do you have some specific numbers? How many people will be laid off?
We don't have specific numbers at this stage, other than the numbers that you have mentioned.
You mentioned the banking sector. Major reforms are also going to be there. They have to adopt new laws for the regulatory agencies. We see that they will sit in each other's boards. So what is the main goal? Is it maybe to make a single supervision of the banks?
No, it's not. It's very clear in the constitution of Bosnia and Herzegovina that supervision is it's an entity competency, and the IMF fully respects the constitution and abides by the constitution in its recommendation. Let me give you an analogy here. The financial sector in Bosnia and Herzegovina is like a pool, and you have a pool full of water, and then you have a line in the middle. Okay, and this pool is being cleaned by two persons. So these two persons need to agree to clean the pool at the same time, or at different times, to coordinate the way they clean the pool. They need to use the same chemicals, make sure that they don't make it dirty with things that harm the other. So you need to have a very close coordination and the same standards in the two pool cleaners, so the two banking supervisors. So what this piece of legislation does, it modernizes the standards for banking supervision, and it also, so the laws will be fully harmonized, and they will increase cooperation between the two supervisors. So again, it will not be one, but it will hopefully work more like one.
One of the commitments from the letter of intent is that development banks won't be able to finance private sector anymore. Who will they finance then?
No, I think what the letter of intent says, what the letter of intent really says, is that there should be no direct lending from the development banks to a private company, in the sense of the development bank picking a specific company and giving a contract or a loan to a specific company. What the letter of intent does actually is it sets up measures a plan to improve operations of development banks, to improve their oversight, and to improve their transparency. And as such, on the issue of improving their operations, we see that the development banks have a good reason to exist. It's not that we don't want development banks. They should focus more on sectors, and then on lend, provide lines of credit for private banks to lend to these sectors. But the development bank should not be in the business of picking specific companies.
Government of BiH also promised that they won't adopt laws on credit on Swiss francs.
Yes.
That law is now in federal parliament. What if they adopt it?
Well, we think that this law is not good. We think that this law should not be adopted. In a way, the private sector, the banks and the debtors, are working out or resolving issues in a way that we find quite satisfactory. Over 75% of contracts, low contracts, have been renegotiated. I think the percentage is higher than Republika Srpska here in the Federation. Let me tell you why we think that this law would be bad. It's bad because the law retroactively changes private contracts, right? So it introduces legal uncertainty on this country. And number two, the law would be bad because it imposes a very high cost on banks, and it could be, it could hurt their capital. So at the end of the day, it will have more negative effects than good effects.
But what if they adopt it and the government say they won't?
Let's cross that bridge when we get there.
So you won't tell me.
Of course not.
I mean, they have a lot of laws to adopt, but as we see, at least in Federation, everything has stopped. What if they don't fulfill these commitments until the end of the year?
Look, you're right in pointing out that the structural agenda in this program is very ambitious. It's what this country needs. And to be also fair, these are measures that have been postponed for several years. So this is very good in a sense because the laws are there, the drafts are there, the political understanding that these reforms are necessary is there. Now it's just time to just do it. I think it's a bit too early to decide exactly how much will be done before the end of the year. I'm an optimist by nature.
Thank you very much.
No, you're very welcome.